The 2019 Toronto Raptors may have one of the most unpredictable championships in NBA history. They got rid of their franchise pillars for a one-year superstar rental. They won the finals against one of the most stacked teams in all of sports and then never made it back. With a proven superstar in Kawhi Leonard, young talent in Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, and Pascal Siakam, and veterans in Marc Gasol and Serge Ibaka, all with a rookie head coach coming off of a finals victory, Toronto had figured out the formula to put the league on notice. But 5 years later, Toronto has twice failed to make the playoffs and have never returned to the Eastern Conference Finals. So let's see where all the pieces went and see what happened to the 2019 Toronto Raptors. Let's kick this off with one of the most important pieces of the roster, Kawhi Leonard. The man who came in, played one season, won a championship, and then left. Even before he ever put on a Toronto jersey, Kawhi was rumored to want to go to LA when he was a member of the San Antonio Spurs. And the leading rumor was that he wanted to be traded to the Lakers and then for LeBron James to follow him there. Kawhi reportedly has spent a long time weighing between re-signing and going home, but his mind was made up when news of Paul George being traded to the Clippers broke. The two had reportedly discussed a pairing earlier that season, and it's reasonable to believe that if George wasn't traded to the Clippers, Kawhi may have stayed in Toronto. His first 2 seasons in LA would see a new Super team with a semifinals and conference finals appearance. However, Kawhi would tear his ACL in Game 4 of the 2021 Western Conference semifinals. He would then sit out the next season before returning from injury, and during that time, Leonard would slow to come back, putting up substandard stats as well as missing plenty of games due to load management. Slowly but surely, he would return to his normal NBA self. And right now, the Claw is averaging 24, 6, and 4 on what is arguably the best team in the NBA. Dominating the regular season isn't anything new for this Clippers team. Injuries have held them back for the first 5 seasons, and if Kawhi can stay healthy, we might just see him win his 3rd ring. And Kawhi Leonard is not the only 2019 champion on the Clippers. Also joining him is one of the strongest players in the league to come off the bench, Norman Powell. Powell was the team's 6th man for the 2019 finals run. However, his last 2 years in Toronto would see him become the primary shooting guard after Danny Green left in free agency. The 2020 season saw him double his scoring per game on a similar efficiency starting in 26 games. The following season, he was scoring nearly 20 points per night, but the 2021 Raptors were seeing very little success overall and wanted to take the franchise in a new direction. Powell was traded to Portland for Gary Trent Jr. Trent Jr. being a younger, cheaper player who had a similar enough skill set to Powell. In Portland, Norman remained a solid complementary piece alongside Damian Lillard. He earned himself a 5-year, $90 million contract in August of 2021, but Powell wouldn't be able to celebrate for long as he was traded later that season. He, along with Robert Covington, were traded to the Los Angeles Clippers for Eric Bledsoe, Justice Winslow, and Keon Johnson. The Blazers felt confident in the direction of the franchise with Anthony Simons. In the words of Blazers GM Joe Cronin, they cited cap flexibility as the primary reason for the Powell trade. In the most recent 2 seasons, Norman Powell has been an important rotational piece for the Clippers, with his first full season in LA see him finish 4th in 6th Man of the Year voting. And there is still one more player from this championship team who found themselves on the LA Clippers. That would be Serge Ibaka. Ibaka would stay in Toronto for one more season following the 2019 championship, but in the 2020 offseason, he and the Raptors would not see eye to eye. The club had felt satisfied with their big men being Aaron Baines, Alex Len, and Chris Boucher. Toronto also had felt that Ibaka, who would be turning 31 years old that season, was not worth the money that he wanted. This would be a critical loss to their championship core. Ibaka was the epitome of a modern big man. He was solid at stretching the floor while being a good down-low defender and rebounder without being like other unathletic, slower big men. Ibaka's 2 seasons in LA saw him playing a smaller role and playing less minutes as his stats fell across the board. In February of 2022, he was traded to the Milwaukee Bucks. In Milwaukee, he would play for 2 seasons, playing just 35 games, averaging 6 points per game. Ibaka would shortly then leave the Bucks, citing a lack of communication with the team, mostly stemming from not knowing his role and the front office giving him a different expectation than what was that on the court. The 34-year-old is now playing in Germany in the EuroLeague, maybe just hoping for one more chance in the NBA. Ibaka isn't the only member of this team who has found themselves playing overseas either. At 34 years old, Marc Gasol was an important member of the Toronto championship team. He started just 26 games in the regular season as he came in midway for Jonas Valanciunas. Gasol would start in the majority of his games, and he demonstrated himself as an excellent floor spacer, passer, and down low defender. At 35 years old, he exercised a $26 million playing option and would go on to play 44 games in the 2020 season. But it was apparent that Gasol was reaching towards the end of his NBA career. He contemplated returning to Spain before taking a much smaller role with the LA Lakers. He would play in just 52 games, scoring 5 points per game before his last game in the NBA. Gasol would play for a team he founded in Spain for a few seasons before retiring from professional basketball this January. Marc Gasol saw plenty of success both in the NBA and in Europe. Today, he remains as one of the best players to ever come out of Spain, and while he may not be with his brother in the Hall of Fame, he is certainly a Spanish-American basketball legend. Also overseas is Malcolm Miller. Miller was in Toronto for 3 years, with 2020 being his last season. He played in just 53 games in his NBA career, and after his time in Toronto, he would bounce between the Utah Jazz farm team and the Italian Basketball Federation. Currently, the former NBA champion is playing in the Italian second-tier basketball league. And there is still one more player on this team that is recognizable overseas, and that is Jeremy Lin. Lin's last year in the NBA would be that 2019 season where he became the first Asian American and the first Harvard graduate to win the NBA Finals. The following offseason, Jeremy Lin chose to play in China, opting over Russia, Israel, and the EuroLeague. He would be named an All-Star and nearly won Defensive Player of the Year. The following season, he would try to return to the NBA through the Santa Cruz Warriors. He'd be one of the first veterans to sign to a G League roster, and through this, the G League's veteran exception rule became dubbed the Jeremy Lin rule. Lin would then go back to China for 2 seasons before signing with the Taiwanese Basketball Association, where he is still playing today. Like Lin, Patrick McCaw and Jody Meeks are no longer playing in the NBA. Patrick McCaw would play sparse minutes for the next year and suffered a knee injury in the 2021 season. Right now, Patrick McCaw is currently on the Delaware Bluecoats, the 76ers G League team. Jody Meeks only played 8 games for the championship team, and 2019 would be his last season in the NBA. Most recently, he was waived by the Raptors G League team in 2022 and announced his retirement from basketball last season. Obviously, these guys were not a part of the core or even played significant minutes for Toronto, but one guy who did play significant minutes for only 1 season was Danny Green. Green made his mark, averaging 10 points per game starting in 80 games. Following their championship, he signed with the LA Lakers for a 2-year, $30 million deal. Again, he would only spend 1 year on that team, playing a valuable role, winning the 2020 NBA championship. Following that ring, Green was traded to the 76ers for the Lakers to receive Dennis Schroeder. Green then played in Philadelphia for 2 years before tearing his ACL in the playoffs. Green was again traded during the 2022 NBA draft to Memphis for DeAnthony Melton. He played just 3 games in Memphis before being again traded to the Rockets, where he would be bought out of his contract. Last year, he played just 8 games with the Cleveland Cavaliers before signing another contract with the Philadelphia 76ers, and he was most recently cut this November. Green is now a free agent and is yet to announce his retirement from basketball, but given that he has played just 13 games in the last 2 seasons, I would not be surprised to hear that his NBA career is done. Playing in the NBA for 14 years and winning 3 championships is certainly not too bad of a career. And of course, when we're talking about the core of the Raptors, we cannot forget about the man at the helm, Nick Nurse. Nurse originally came into the position after the team fired Dwayne Casey. His first season as head coach would see them win the NBA Finals, making Nick Nurse the first coach in NBA history to win the Finals as well as the G League title. Following the departure of Kawhi Leonard, the Raptors went 53-19. Nurse was named a head coach for the 2020 All-Star Game and won Coach of the Year. They lost to the Boston Celtics in 7 games, but Nurse was still awarded with a contract extension. His last playoff appearance in Toronto would be in 2022, seeing the Raptors lose in the first round. In April of 2023, the team fired Nick Nurse after they failed to make the playoffs and lost to the Chicago Bulls in the play-in tournament. This offseason, Nurse was hired by the 76ers, and at the time that I make this, Philadelphia sits around the 5th seed in the East. And Nurse isn't the only Raptor who is currently on the 76ers, as they had recently signed Kyle Lowry. Lowry spent 9 years in Toronto, becoming one of the most loved players in franchise history. After winning the championship, Kyle Lowry would make one more All-Star appearance and play for 2 more seasons in Toronto. In August of 2021, he was traded for Goran Dragic and Precious Achiuwa as a part of the Toronto Raptors heading in a new direction. While Lowry did take a step back stats-wise, at 35 years old, he was a key starter on a 53-win Miami Heat team that took the Celtics to 7 games in the 2022 Eastern Conference Finals. And then last season, the Miami Heat would finish as the 8th seed in the East, but they would make the NBA Finals, losing to 5 games against the Nuggets. This season, Kyle Lowry was traded for Terry Rozier before being waived by the Charlotte Hornets. Recently, he signed with Nick Nurse in the 76ers and so far has only played in 2 games. There were 3 more players who were both key to the championship and seemingly felt like the future of this Toronto team. While the 3 were on the team last season, they have all found themselves playing elsewhere today. First is Fred VanVleet. 2020 saw VanVleet's first year as a full-time starter, and he was rewarded with his excellent play, signing a 4-year, $85 million contract in November of 2020. The following 2 seasons saw VanVleet put up 19-7, and he earned his first All-Star appearance in 2022. Last offseason, VanVleet made himself a free agent by declining a player option. While the Raptors had wanted to re-sign him, the Houston Rockets emerged as more willing suitors, paying him $128 million over 3 years. It was an incredibly painful goodbye for both parties, and despite making over $40 million this year, VanVleet has yet to return to the same averages we saw him at in Toronto. Both OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam made it to the opening day roster for the Raptors. Anunoby had emerged as one of the league's best prospects following the 2019 season. He was an impactful perimeter defender who is getting better on the offensive end every single year. His best season saw him scoring 17 points per game on 58% true shooting percentage. He was also 2nd all-team defense and finished 7th in Defensive Player of the Year voting. Going into this season, OG was set to earn a big contract, more than what the Raptors wanted to pay. Instead of losing him this offseason, they wanted to bring in younger talent. This December, he was traded for RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickley. OG has played strong in his 14 games in New York. His first 10 games saw him set a plus-minus of 170, an NBA record for a player starting on a new team. Recently, he had been sidelined with an injury, with an expected return before these playoffs. And the last player of this 2019 Raptors squad is Pascal Siakam. Following the loss of Kawhi Leonard, Siakam emerged as the team's best player. He earned All-Star appearances in 2020 and 2023 with an All-NBA team nod in 2022. Like OG, the Raptors did not want to pay the massive deal that Siakam was going to be owed. A few weeks after the Anunoby trade, Pascal Siakam was traded to the Indiana Pacers for younger players and draft picks. So far, Siakam has been great in Indiana. His skill set pairs well with Tyrese, and the Pacers are expected to make the playoffs with these two at the helm, leading one of the most highest scoring offenses in NBA history. The 2019 Raptors had an incredibly strong core. It was a combination of guys on good contracts who loved the team, the city, and the fans. Many of those who had left would go on to speak very highly of their time in Toronto and said that it wasn't easy to leave the team. While it is a shame that they never worked out beyond a few seasons, it is safe to say that this core had led to many special memories for Raptors fans. While I and many others would have loved to see what this team could have done if they had stayed and grown together, possibly see a repeat championship appearance and hopefully against a non-injured Warriors team, you could also argue that guys like Siakam, VanVleet, and Anunoby would not become the players that they are now with a smaller role. Ultimately, the early 2020s Toronto Raptors teams are one of the biggest what-ifs in recent NBA history. And while their core was made up of plenty of good, maybe not great players, you can still never take away from what they did in the 2019 season. But guys, this is what happened to the championship Raptors. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, you know what to do, and that is it for this one. I will catch you guys later.